Top of the morning, everyone. My name is Tshidi and I'm back with another video. Today's video is going to be focusing on final job interviews. What are some of the things you should avoid and what are some of the things you should focus on? It's very important to understand a few things. Now, sometimes in some of these final job interviews, you've gone through 5, 6, 7 different rounds of interviews. You've done assessments, you've done all these things, and you're finally being called for a final job interview and you end up messing up with just one little small thing. So trying to give you a few tips about what are some of the things you should focus on and what you should actually try and avoid is a nice way of making sure that you're prepared for whatever they throw at you in the next final job interview. So let's start first with the things that you should avoid focusing a bit too much on, because then they basically end up being a waste of your time. So number one is negativity about your past. It's important that you make sure that with everything that you do, you avoid being so negative about what's happened in the past, because in that particular sense, you need to focus more on what you actually think you'll be able to deliver for that company. Number two is overconfidence and complacency. Now, overconfidence tends to, shoot a lot of people in the foot a lot, because some people end up thinking, you know what, I've got this, I've gone through 3 or 4 different job interviews, or I've done a few rounds of interviews. The hiring manager really told me that they like me, and this is just a formality for me to actually meet the execs or to meet the CEO or to meet whoever, so I can relax a bit and just try and show off. Complacency, that's when it actually kicks in. The second thing that also comes in is that you remember that most of the times when you get to the final job interview, the idea is for the other people to buy into what the other panels have already bought into about your background. So it's important that you maintain that level of focus in when you're getting into that final job interview. Number 3 is focusing too much on generic answers. Now, remember, I've already said there's no way in today's date that you can go to a job interview and then once you finish the job interview, you say you have got no questions to ask. What exactly you can do, you can check out the video up here. It talks about the top 5 questions that you can ask at the end of every job interview. So now, this is a chance for you to not have anything that is too generic when you're actually giving answers, because at that particular time, you've had a few chances to ask very specific things about what are the expectations of growth in this team? What does performance look like? What does growth look like? What are some of the things that are challenging the team? You've already had a chance to ask those questions. So to come back with a simple thing that says, I've got no specific questions that I wanted to focus on or no specific things that I want to actually share with this panel is normally a waste of your time. So please make sure that you avoid generic answers. Make sure that you showcase that you've learned something in your previous interview. Number 4 is overlooking non-verbal cues. Now, in most cases, final job interviews are either the head of the department or the CEO or the MD or the director or whoever it is. So non-verbal cues are also very important. It's about being able to understand, to read the room. There are times when you're explaining something and you realize that the people have now gone past whatever the question they asked about that, and you've been explaining for too long. Try and read the room and understand if these people are still engaged, because if they're not engaged, it's time to try and pivot a bit and make sure that you bring in, the audience back to what you're trying to say. The last thing about this one that you should avoid doing is the non-follow-up. Following up is a fantastic thing, especially if you've been given an opportunity to meet with the MD, the CEO, or the director of that particular business. There's nothing much better than being able to actually send a follow-up email to say, thank you so much for this opportunity. I've had a chance to actually speak to so-and-so. These are some of the highlights of what I've actually learned about your company, and this is why I think I'll be the right person for that. So that follow-up email is a fantastic way of actually still reiterating the fact you're still very interested in that, and it gives the hiring manager a bit of a ample opportunity to go back and actually say to these guys, listen, this guy still really wants this job because of that particular follow-up. Now, those are the 5 things that you should avoid doing in any job interview. So this is what you should focus on when it comes to the final job interview. Research and preparation. Now, I cannot say this enough about research and preparation. Now, remember the previous job interviews that you've had in that particular scenario were a chance for you to learn as much as you can. Whatever you've heard about that, you ask the next question to learn a bit more so that you can gather as much information as possible. Continue the same research that you've been doing at the beginning. In this instance, you now have a chance because you've asked a few questions. You understand some of the things that could actually help you in making sure that you fulfill whatever you wanted to share with the panel. So continue doing a bit more research. You might find out where you can find a lot more data that you couldn't find on other social media platforms or on the website through the conversations that you're having with other team members, or sometimes together with the panel that you might have had before in the past. So it's important that you keep on preparing, you keep on preparing as if you're going for the first round interview. Remind yourself some of the things that you might have forgotten in the first, second, and third round interview, and make sure that you're actually a bit more focused. The next thing that you should always worry about is with the final round interview, because normally it's the senior leadership where they don't necessarily have to test the technical capabilities of what you can offer. Be prepared for scenario-based interviews. Now, this is where they want to actually understand, based on the scenarios that they've already seen in a particular team, can you be able to deal with some of those things? And scenario-based interviews are almost the same as competency-based interviews. So the focus on this one is to try and make sure that you give examples of any one of those. If they give you a scenario that says, let's say X has happened in your company and you're now the only person that's supposed to do this, how would you deal with it? The easiest way is you can give them an answer to say, usually this is what I would do. However, in the past, I was faced with a slightly similar scenario. This is basically what's happened. This is what we did. And this is how the outcome was. Whether the outcome was positive or not positive, guys, it's still important that you showcase that you've actually learned something in the past and that there's something that actually came out of that scenario. So don't just sit there and just talk about, oh yeah, this is what I would do, where it's a hypothetical answer. Make sure that you always give examples of some of the things that were aligned. Culture fit is the third one. Now, culture fit is very important because in most cases you'll find that either you in your final round interview, you've got either the HR director or the head of HR or HR business partner or somebody within HR that's coming in there together with the MD, the CEO, the director, whoever it is. And one of the things that they're actually trying to protect is to protect the culture that they've already built within that particular structure or within that team. And in most cases, they're trying to check if you fit into that culture. So that's why it's important that you actually showcase what you're capable of without just only forgetting who you are as a person and showcasing your personality. So culture fit, it becomes one of those critical things because sometimes they want to see, will you be one of those people that will come and disrupt the team in the positive way, where you'll challenge the status quo and try and drive the team to do a bit better? Or are you one of those people that's going to come in and become a disruptor in a very negative way? Vision and alignment. Now, vision and alignment is the last one that you should actually focus on because this is the time where you now showcase to the people that you've learned everything in the previous interviews that you've had and you've got a vision of what you think that role is able to do. And this is because you're now meeting with either the MD, the director. Number one is, do you understand what the alleged strategy of that team is or what they're trying to achieve? And number two, do you understand where the company is trying to go? Now, once you understand those things, this is your chance to actually now showcase that you have a bit of a vision or an alignment as to the strategy of that company where you can speak about, I hear this is what you guys are trying to do. One of the things that I like about that is because of XYZ. One of my things that I've always wanted to learn to do is this and that. And I'm so happy that you guys are going through that journey because then I'll be able to partake in whatever you guys are focusing on. Those are, for me, the 4 most important things that you should focus on in any final job interview. So remember, when it comes to final job interviews, guys, you've worked really hard to get to that stage. So because you've worked really hard to get to that stage, remember things that you should avoid. Number 1, negativity about the past. Forget about the past and focus on the future. Number 2, overconfidence and complacency. Guys, this is not a chance to start thinking, I've got this job, tough luck, everybody else can forget about it. Number 3, generic responses. You've learned all these things that you've learned over the last couple of interviews. So showcase that you've learned that by making sure that you're specific in your answer. Number 4, overlooking nonverbal cues. Read the room. I think one of the things that people make mistakes about is not being able to read the room. Number 5 is ignoring the follow-up. The follow-up is extremely important. And then the things you should definitely do is continue the research that you've been doing all this time. Number 2 is scenario-based questions. Make sure that you actually are prepared for that. Think about examples of any scenarios that could happen in that particular future role. And then number 3 is culture fit. This is the time where people want to check if you can actually fit into that culture. Most of the time, the technical views have already been covered by the previous teams or the assessments that they might have done. And finally, the vision alignment. Do you have the same vision as the company and where it wants to go? Those are, for me, the most important things you should focus on when it comes to your final job interviews. Until we meet next time,